I'm just going to wait. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to wait really 30 seconds to wait a few more people to join, and then we'll start. So bear with me, because we had quite a lot of people wanted to participate. So the room is filling up. And yeah, let's start. So good afternoon and welcome. This is the second of our New Ways of Working webinar. I'm Rosanna Buccheri. I'm the co-chair of the Smart Working workstream at the Diversity Project. And today with me is Sarah Kaiser, Head of Employee Experience at Fidelity International. Now, the idea of this really 30 minutes of webinar is to give you all a really tangible example of how companies have taken the challenges of COVID and transformed it really an opportunity to change their ways of working. So hopefully you'll find interesting ideas that you can cherry pick and transport to your company and evolve in new ways of working also inside your company. I will let Sarah to have a 15-20 minutes presentation. So she will share with us how Fidelity International has tackled the issue and proposed this new setup for all employees across the world. Please feel free to write down questions if you have through the Q&A button that you have on the screen, or just to raise hand, and you will be unmuted. And when Sarah has finished the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask a question. Time is running, and as it is only a 30 minutes webinar, I leave the floor to Sarah.
Thank you, Rosanna, and thank you to the Diversity Project for organising this today, because I know this is a topic that's front of mind for so many people. You might have seen that a couple of weeks ago, Fidelity announced that we are introducing a new way of working for all of our employees globally, which we call dynamic working. And this is about trusting and empowering all of our people to work in a way that suits them, giving them as much flexibility as is possible in terms of both where they work and when they work. And then really just trusting them to find a way that will suit them, but also enable them to deliver for the business, for their clients, and to work with their teams. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about what that means for us, the story of how we got there. And of course, we're not finished yet. We've announced this, but implementing it takes far longer. And we're still wrestling with some really thorny questions. So I'll share those with you as well. So previous to the pandemic, Fidelity did offer some flexible working, but in a fairly limited way. So within the UK, we had launched something at the time we called New Ways of Working, which meant that people could typically work from home, maybe 1-2 days a week with permission, and other forms of flexibility were allowed. It was more rare for people to work flexibly in our other locations because we have 46 offices across 27 different locations. Of course, when the pandemic hit, we all began to work remotely, as everyone did. And we were able to shift quite quickly to working from home because of the prior setup we had of allowing people to work from home, but it did still require a great deal of adjustment. We certainly did not think at the time that, nearly 18 months later, I'd still be sitting at home doing this presentation to you today. Throughout the pandemic, we ran a number of wellbeing surveys. We really wanted to listen to our people to understand how to respond. And we also took the opportunity to ask people about what they wanted from the office in the future. And what we'd learned was that while people were really struggling with all of the challenges and anxiety related to the pandemic, they did value the concept of greater flexibility. And no one really wanted to go back to the office 5 days a week. We found that the vast majority wanted more flexibility, freedom, and choice. They recognized the value of the office for collaboration and connectivity. Many of us really miss the office for those reasons, but they also valued that ability to concentrate effectively for a better work-life balance and to create their own days and to work at times that suited them and suited the needs of their business. So this was when we decided that we weren't going back to business as usual before, but we needed to go back to something new. We decided to call it dynamic working because it reflected that feeling of change. We wanted people to be able to work in a way that suits them and their business, but to recognize this is something that will change and evolve as we go on. And we've always said that we will keep iterating and learning from this process. The first step we did was to really set out a framework of what it was we wanted to offer. We developed a number of principles around how we wanted to work. And those principles were about trusting our people to work effectively, about judging people's performance based on what they delivered and contributed, not the hours they worked, and on enabling the maximum possible flexibility. Once we knew that was what we wanted to do, we set up a steerco, some teams and projects, and really developed the framework. So in the team we had a framework group who are going to develop the framework with more details around what that would look like. We have a people experience work stream. The people experience work stream is responsible for bringing this to life, helping managers feel equipped to lead teams effectively, and to making sure everyone feels included and valued and that their well-being is supported in a hybrid world. We had an office work stream who were responsible for looking at how our offices would need to change and evolve to support people, and a tech work stream who would look at what technology was required to support people to work effectively from wherever they may be, whether in the office and at home. And finally, we had a communications work stream. It was really important for us to take our people on the journey with us, to be very honest with them and transparent about where we were. And even when that meant we didn't have all the answers yet, to let them understand that journey. So this group developed our framework. And what we did was every single role in the company was categorized for how much flexibility could be permitted in two ways. So the first was we categorized where roles could work. So some roles were identified as possible to be 100% remote. So that means that it would be very unlikely they'd need to come to the office more than perhaps once or twice a year. They could do their role from anywhere and they would be 100% remote. And that would be a contractual change for those individuals. There were also some roles which were identified as required to be 100% in the office. Now, typically these are roles which are very office-based, such as security, receptionists, and so on. But actually, there were also a few regulated roles which were required to be in the office, like in some of our locations, traders are required to be in the office, for example. The remainder of our workforce was characterized as hybrid. Now, for those of us who are in hybrid roles, we would be expected to work between home and the office. We gave people rough guidelines on how much they could expect to need to come to the office. Now, this is very much dependent on your team and what you do. And so we gave very broad guidelines that we anticipate that anyone in a hybrid role would need to come to the office between 4 to 12 days a month. And then their local leaders would give them more guidance on what was expected in their area. Typically, most business leaders feel their people need to be in the office probably 2 to 3 days a week. But the reason we've gone for month is we recognize that can really change depending on your meetings and what your day looks like. There may be a week you need to be in the office every day, and the next week perhaps there's no need for you to come in at all. This is all about treating people like sensible adults, encouraging them to think purposefully about their days. So if I have a day of global Zoom calls, there's no value to me going to the office. We see the office as a hive of creativity, culture, and community. And we want people to come in for those in-person meetings, for workshops and creative discussions, for the one-to-one conversations you hold better face-to-face, but also for things like inducting new starters and welcoming visitors. And we want people to think about when those things will happen and to be in the office for those days. And this is why we very much chose not to be prescriptive and say you must work in the office X days per week, because we recognize those needs vary. And we want people to think about the type of work they're doing and where they should be. On the days an individual doesn't need to be in the office, it's up to them where they can work from. We know from our surveys that some people just prefer to be in the office. They don't feel their home environment is the best for working. And we provide quiet zones in the office for them to work. But equally, they could choose to work from home if they wish. So this was the first categorization, 100% remote, 100% in office or hybrid. And 93% of our roles have been characterized as hybrid. So that's really the most common for us. The second categorization was about the hours you work. And people could either be mapped as predefined hours or flexible hours. Now, if someone works in predefined hours, that typically means there's a requirement for them to work at specific times, whether that's a shift worker, maybe someone in a client-facing role who's on the phones, or who needs to be around at a specific time, or where a team needs coverage over specific hours. It doesn't mean there can't be any flexibility over those hours, but they would just need to agree their working pattern in advance with their manager. About 2/3 of our people were mapped as flexible hours. And for those people, while we've put in some guidelines around what that means, it really means you pick the pattern that works for you. If I want to start my day early to have some calls with people who are based in Asia time zones, and then take a really long lunch break and work out, or finish a bit earlier, or take a break to drop off or pick up my kids from school, that's up to me to manage my day and think about what works best. Maybe to commute at a different time outside rush hour. As long as I get my work done and I'm available to collaborate with my team, again, we're trusting people to be sensible about what's required. So there's 6 squares effectively that each role could be mapped into based on the combination of where you can work and when you can work. Everyone has that mapping. It's on our HR system, and that was announced recently. That sounds all quite simple, perhaps, but because we've gone through that trust-based approach, we do recognize it can put certain pressures on people. In a lot of ways, it's easier to just say, you must be in the office on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, even though it might not work for your life or for what you need to deliver. So there's a few things we've put in place to try and make this a bit easier, and I just wanted to share a few examples of those. The first was for managers. We really wanted to equip our managers to be able to think about how they can best support their teams through this. We know we demand a lot of managers already, increasingly more and more, and we recognize that not all managers would have the skills needed for this. Managers should be used to looking after a remote team by now. Hopefully they still remember what it's like to manage people back in the office, but it's a new complexity to think about a team which could be in different locations and at different hours. So to support managers, we've produced a guide on what dynamic working means, which is available for managers and employees, and sets out some guidelines around things like when you work and how you work. But we've also produced a talking points document for managers to support them in having good conversations with their teams on this. It gave our managers some topics they should think about in advance before talking to their team members about how dynamic working should function in their areas, and questions they should discuss in their teams. And the purpose of this document was to help managers to consider the needs of their team so they could make sure that everyone was available to collaborate together and with their stakeholders, whether those are in other teams or clients, as well as to make sure they could balance that with individual preferences and circumstances. At the end of the day, managers really do need to think about when they want their teams to be together and what for, to plan that in and to make sure their team members understand what's expected of them so they can plan their weeks as well. We did include a number of scenarios in the talking points guides. What to do if you have a team member who says they just don't want to come in, what you can do if someone says, I'd like to go and live in a different country, is that okay? Or what to do if someone never has their camera on in a Zoom meeting, is that okay or isn't that okay? So that was quite important as a first step. As a next step, there's lots more we're planning to do with both managers and employees around what working effectively looks like. We believe that the biggest thing that managers need to lead effectively in this is not a change of skills, but a change of mindset. So our learning and development and talent teams have been working very closely on producing a number of resources and training materials for managers on how to achieve that mindset shift and how to think about supporting collaboration and connectivity in their teams. We were very concerned at the beginning about whether hybrid working could set up any inequalities in our teams. For example, we wondered if people who are more visible in the office and to their managers might find it easier to progress than those who worked more frequently from home. To try and address this, we've not only put in guidance for managers and some things into the guidance around our performance review system, but we're also giving some tools to employees. We want to encourage individuals to take more ownership of their careers, their development, and their networks, which are so important to us, and to recognize how wherever they're working from, they can build those really strong relationships and build their careers successfully. So all of this training materials is extremely important to support dynamic working. But we're also using technology to try and solve some of these difficult problems. So one question that a lot of people said to us was, how on earth am I going to know what day to come in? We have a system, a desk booking system, but what if I come into the office and no one I need to work with is there? How can I communicate with all my different stakeholders? So our brilliant tech team have developed an app, a workplace app, and as well as simple things which I think we'll all take for granted in the future, like allowing you on the app to book your desk, to find a meeting room, to connect to a Zoom meeting, and then if you walk into a meeting room, make sure it automatically connects to that Zoom so you're not sitting there dialing in. What I love most about the app is a feature called Workplace Together. So the app recognizes the 10 to 12 people that you collaborate with the most frequently through emails and meetings. And it lets you know if they've booked a desk in the office on a particular day. So you can then think, that's a great day for me to come to the office. So I can collaborate with them and we can have face-to-face meetings. It also allows managers to book a set of desks for their team if they want their team to come in together to work together, rather than just for individual settings and that individual desk booking. These things I think will really help people think more broadly around the purpose of the office as that connectivity place and how to come in and how to plan and communicate without putting any onerous manual processes around it. We're exploring some pretty cool stuff for the future as well, like prompts to help people build their networks by introducing you to people who collaborate frequently with your frequent collaborators. So you can extend your network, and where you work shouldn't be a barrier to you meeting more people. There's a lot more we need to do. I've just scratched the surface there because I want to allow plenty of time for questions. But what I would say about Fidelity's approach overall is it's very much based on who we are as a company. Fidelity's values are about trust and integrity. We are a very collaborative, very consultative company, and community is really important to our sense of culture. We also have behaviors around being brave and bold and curious and compassionate. And I would say all of this has come together in our approach to dynamic working. While we found a hybrid way of working that's probably very middle ground, we're not one of these extremes saying come back to work every day. We're not saying you can work wherever you want, whenever you want. It's that thoughtful grown-up approach to how can we best collaborate? How can we support you as an individual and enable everyone to work together brilliantly? I know we're going to continue to learn and evolve as we go, but I did just want to share what we are doing with managers and the app particularly, as I thought that might be helpful for you to think about. And Rosanna, maybe I could hand back to you now so we can open the questions.
Thank you, Sarah. And actually, your point on the middle manager and the capacity to give them all really the instrument to deal is something that we have been hearing a lot. And I quite like. I was actually relooking the meaning of trust. If you think, coming from the Latin fides fidei, which is confidence, loyalty, honesty, that you think that are the quality that you look in the people that you're recruiting in your team. So thank you very much for sharing, to sort of remind us that trust is quite important and we are all grown up. There are quite a few questions actually. There is a question on, when you were talking about the scenario and so really of the instrument that you were giving to the middle manager, what to do for the people that don't want to come in at all, or they want to work abroad. So what are the answers? Because we are getting into the sort of little practical question.
The nitty gritty. So when it comes to people working abroad, that was part of our framework group. We know there's a lot of people who do want to work from different countries. We've said at a very general level that we will support employees to work for up to 3 weeks a year from a different country if we have a Fidelity office there. There are a couple of exceptions to that, depending on tax arrangements in particular countries and also people's roles, but typically that's what we'll allow without any need for further approvals, as long as your manager's supportive. If people want to work longer or from a different country where we don't have an office, then they need to get permission and sign off. And this allows us to just look at a whole range of tax and legal issues, which are quite boring. The camera one is more nuanced. As part of our guidance and support around this, we are producing some guidelines on how to hold really inclusive meetings. One of the benefits we found of working remotely is that Zoom is a great equalizer. No matter where you are in the world, what level you're at, you occupy the same size square on the screen. And some of our people have found it much easier to have their voice heard. And we don't want to lose that when we go back to face-to-face meetings. But we are also very aware that we've lost lots of benefits of face-to-face meetings like body language and so on. So we want people to really think about the right medium for the meeting they're having. We recognize some people don't want to put their cameras on for a variety of reasons. It could range from not having enough bandwidth on your internet at home to feeling embarrassed about your surroundings if several people are working from home in the same room, to just real Zoom fatigue. I find it exhausting being able to see myself while I'm speaking. I'm just constantly looking at myself thinking, oh, my hair's a mess. I make the funniest facial expressions. And I can totally understand why people do want to switch it off. So what we're trying to do is say to managers and team leaders, there are good reasons people might not want their cameras on. However, we're also saying to people, it's far easier to read body language and understanding and to show you're engaged and interested and build your connection if you do have your camera on. So we would just say to leaders to encourage people to put their camera on if they feel comfortable to do so. And if they don't, to recognize there's probably a reason for that.
There is a question in terms of pushback. If there is any major pushback that you had as you have been presenting the new policy across the globe and across different business.
There's not been any major pushback. There've certainly been questions about what it would mean and what it would look like. What was interesting to me is we often anticipated pushback from areas where it didn't come. So, for example, Japan is a culture where there's very much a culture of presenteeism in the office, and people would often work very long hours, and we didn't think people would feel very comfortable with this approach. But actually, it's like giving people permission to finally not have to just be in the office for the sake of it. Not that we were that bad at it compared to local culture, but it's a real relief for people. I think what's been the most tricky is for the most junior managers sometimes knowing when they should and shouldn't bring their team in. And we've been quite careful to make sure we don't want too many inconsistencies to creep in because of allowing that variation. So we're always just trying to say, sense check, are we asking people to come in the right amount? Are we selling the office well enough without making people feel pressured to come to the office for the sake of it? So it's more that we are pushing ourselves deliberately to get that balance right.
And I have actually a question. How do you think you'll measure the success of the new policy? And I appreciate that, and you clearly stated, is not the final package. Of course, so there's going to be a lot of change over time because situation change, and you probably learn by doing certain things, and it will retract. But how will you judge the success of what you have implemented and the freedom and and trust that you have given to people?
Yeah, well, we'll keep listening to people and their feedback through our surveys to understand how they feel about it. We've had a really positive reaction from our people so far to what we're offering. But ultimately, I think the real measure of success is how successful is our business. We found that during the pandemic, we've done really well. The business is growing, but we also know that productivity has suffered in that it's harder to get things done. We're working longer, but we're maybe not producing as much as we would like to, despite the great effects. So we'll see that in the business success, and we'll also see it in our ability to attract and retain really great talent. We already know that we're seeing people wanting to work for us whose companies are perhaps less supportive of flexible working. And so whether they feel they enjoy our culture, they want to stay with us, will be the real test for us.
There is another question, actually, Sarah. I'm going to read it because, sorry, I was taking notes. Yeah, is the unconscious bias. I mean, I think you touch it in the sense that you're trying to review your performance review process and trying to judge people for the outcome and not for the hour. But how you will make sure that there's not going to be a sort of unconscious bias and people who are not in the office are going to be treated the same as people in the office? Yeah, I mean, it's the usual question of course, the women are going to be super relieved because they can juggle their agenda better. But does it mean that then you're going to have all the men in the office and all the women actually taking the hybrid?
It's really hard for us to know. And just on what you said, I know a lot of people are concerned that women are going to be disadvantaged because they'll spend more time with childcare and other responsibilities and might not be in the office so much. But I actually wonder if we might not see that, because something I've noticed during the pandemic is that working fathers who hadn't previously spent as much time with their children have really relished this opportunity at home and have had their eyes open to what they've been missing. And I suspect they're going to want to keep that just as much as the mothers who always felt they had to do it. So I hope actually that will change a bit in the future. But we are very much putting out messages around our performance management and reviews, around goals, around looking at what people are contributing and what they're delivering in the context of their individual circumstances. I'm not going to know for a while how that comes out, but we do always look at our performance and progression through a gender lens to check that everything is fair. And it's certainly something I'm going to be scrutinizing as we go forward.
That makes absolutely sense. I mean, we are hitting to the 30 minutes. I cannot see any raise hand, but does anybody wants to ask a directed question or have any other question for Sarah? If not, I think I will not take more time. And Sarah, thank you very much. I mean, as you can see from the question, is actually people are super attentive, and everybody's going through the same sort of thought process. What is the right approach for my company? So, as I told you, when I was asking you to come to this webinar, it's super important to hear lively from the people that have implemented and have thought of all the hurdle and obstacles. So thank you again from myself and from the Diversity Project. I take it to this opportunity to tell to everybody that next week there's going to be our last of this webinar. I took the initiative actually to invite Square, a US-based fintech. I mean, we know that a lot of above all millennial and people just love to go to fintech company and high tech company. I think what Sarah has presented, I mean, our industry is really catching up. So I'm sure that we're going to be able to attract talent. But I thought that it was interesting to invite them and hear what they've been doing also after COVID. And of course, it can be also a source of idea for other companies in our industry. Thanks, Sarah, again. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.